Hi, everybody. This is Alan Stadmauer from Amplify. Thank you so much for joining us today as we talk about the key upgrades to the new mCLASS. Let's start with just a little bit of housekeeping rules. So first of all, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. If you're having any difficulties, you can just let us know in the question panel, but to be perfectly honest, the easiest thing to do is leave Zoom and then restart it. What I really want to share for everyone is that we should have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end today. I'm going to move through showing you what we need to know about the key upgrades in the new mCLASS, and then take questions and answers. If you look at your Zoom, I guess it's your toolbar, there is an icon there labeled Q&A. You can open up that box and then you can add questions there as we go along. We'll answer everything near the end. If you're struggling with finding that, you're also welcome to use the chat box to us, and we'll answer questions that way. So again, questions in the Q&A tab. Our goal for today is to make sure that at the end of our time together, each of you is comfortable with what is changing. So the big area is to understand the key shifts and key upgrades from DIBELS Next to DIBELS 8th edition. And we'll also be able to talk about how the new mCLASS leverages and takes advantage of the deeper data for all students in DIBELS 8th edition in order to help you with really great reporting and smooth and easy immediate instruction. So I'm Alan Stadmauer. I'm the Executive Director of Literacy here at Amplify. Coming to the work in Amplify since 2007, originally part of the PD team, worked on a variety of different products, and now one of the leaders working on mCLASS. Before that, I was a high school teacher and principal, so I've been in education for about 30 years. And I know pretty much, I think, a lot of how you may be feeling right now when you have this kind of moment of change, that cross between what is this really, what is it going to mean, why are we going to do it, and at the same time, a lot of excitement around what it can mean. Isn't it about time that they updated DIBELS and mCLASS? So just to take us back for a moment, Amplify goes back to the year 2000. Some of you on the phone may even remember the Palm Pilot days. Now we are a curriculum and assessment company for grades K through 8 with a variety of different products in both ELA and science. But honestly, our heart and soul goes back to our earliest beginnings with mCLASS and DIBELS Next, and our laser focus on literacy and supporting struggling readers K6, and especially in K2 and K3. By now, mCLASS has had 14 million students. All of its versions have been time tested. One of the things we've also been doing is with each new version of DIBELS, we also take the opportunity not only to bring it onto mCLASS, but use it for a complete top to bottom overhaul of the home class portal, of the assessment administration, and to improve your entire experience. Now, as we begin to go into this a little bit more, I know that some of you on the line may have already decided that you are upgrading to DIBELS 8th edition for this coming school year and are here today to learn more about DIBELS and get those highlights for what's new. Others of you may be joining us because you're still in that process of discovery and understanding while you're making your final decisions about next year, and you really want to know also what are those key shifts, but also a big picture of the why. So DIBELS 8th edition is authored by the University of Oregon. It has been in the field now for over a year in paper and pencil, and the central goal is to expand and refine DIBELS Next. The Center for Teaching and Learning looked at the ongoing, there's been research for many, many years that keeps moving forward and making sure that they've looked to update the assessment with the most up-to-date reading research, assessment research. They began to develop the assessment, and we'll see the why and the how and what they're changing, and then proceeded to do a significant level of reliability and validity studies, more than any prior version of DIBELS was ever done in the past. In addition, they looked at the new NCII standards for reliability and validity and built this assessment and the research base to make sure that it is able to meet the new standards for the National Center on Intensive Interventions reliability and validity scales. Now, mCLASS overall has a number of different components, some of which you use, some of which you may not even know about. We have the classic teacher-administered assessment. We have the world-class data and reporting tools. Some of you may not yet be familiar with the teacher-led instruction, and we also have as an option intervention and adaptive curriculum, where students are on devices working at their own pace on their literacy skills. And there's also been the opportunity over these past few years, to do computer-based assessment, administered assessment for grades 2 through 6 for the proficient readers who are ready to do their benchmarks on computer. What we're going to focus on in this webinar is going to be the teacher-administered assessment, the new reporting tools, and teacher-led instruction. If you want in the question and answers, please feel free to ask me about our intervention product and/or ask me about Amplify Reading, our student-led adaptive program. The computer-administered assessments, like in the past, are similar and they're parallel for the teacher-administered, but they're going to be coming out, releasing much, much later in the school year, or at the very latest in a year from the fall. So we're not going to talk about that at all today. We're going to stay focused on the things that are most important for us right now. So what is changing? What's the big picture of the new DIBELS? In the bottom line, I would say that it is more complete information. It goes deeper diagnostic data for all of your students, not just your at-risk students, but deeper data about your proficient students and about the well above benchmark students in a more actionable reporting platform with instant targeted instruction, and to do all of this in less time. So let's start with what I think people are always most interested in, which is how do we do it in less time? And then after we do this, we're going to go back to the big ideas of what are the new measures, the changes in DIBELS 8, and how do we get information for both the at-risk students and the proficient students and be able to paint a bigger picture. So the simplest change, well, maybe not so simple. The biggest change that impacts time is the reduction of oral reading fluency from 3 passages to 1 passage. We'll talk about other details in ORF a little bit later, but the big idea that I want to raise here is this question of why just 1 passage. Basically, the authors of the assessment at the University of Oregon started looking very deep down into what the results were from having 3 passages. And every which way that they ran the numbers, they found that having 1 passage or 3 resulted in the same quality of data for all students. If they looked at 1 passage versus an average of the 3 versus a best of the 3 versus any which way you put it, it came out that the correlation between the 1 passage results and the 3 passage results were similar. So why not save teachers time? Why not save students frustration and just drop it down to 1 passage? Sorry, the second big change also comes in ORF, which is take away retell and instead let maze, which is just the new name for days, to take a bigger load of the reading comprehension. As we know, teachers have often felt that retell takes time, and while it definitely was a useful measure and reliable and valid, the questions have always been whether or not, how do you go about scoring retell? How do I know I'm doing it right? How do I know that I'm going to do this with fidelity? So ORF drops in time because it's 1 passage and we skip over the retell. The second way we save time is by introducing new adaptive procedures. So by this, we mean 2 things. The first thing is an enhancement of what's always been discontinued rules. We're used to the idea of struggling readers. If they hit the 3-second hesitation timer, we move on. If they're not doing well, maybe we stop the benchmark. We'll see in a little bit that the forms have been laid out to make this even better so we can capture more information on struggling readers before they hit discontinue. but we now even have discontinued benchmark rules where a child in the early grades may not even have to do all of the measures. Conversely, there are gating rules in the later grades where some of the strongest students may not have to do all the measures. To look at that a little bit more specifically, but only as examples to understand it, is in kindergarten and first grade, we're going to start by assessing the foundational skills. In this case, letter naming fluency and phonemic segmentation fluency. We'll talk a little bit later about PSF rather than LNF. And then if a student is really struggling on this and they are not doing well, we are not going to assess them at all with nonsense word fluency or the new word reading fluency. Conversely, when a student is in the middle of first grade and on through third grade, we're going to start with the more sophisticated skills like oral reading fluency. And if they score high enough on ORF, they won't have to go back to nonsense word fluency or word reading fluency. So again, some of my throwing out the measure names we'll see more clearly in a few minutes, but here's the big idea is in the beginning, start with the things that struggling readers might show that they are struggling, and if not appropriate, don't do all of the measures. Later grades, start with the most sophisticated skills, and the most proficient readers may also shorten their time. On our end, the designers of mCLASS have looked at every single mouse click and every single swipe that you might do to see where we could save time and make more efficiently the actual administration of assessment and the reporting. For example, as you can see here, you actually start when you come into the mCLASS assessment on your touch device, you start with your class list, and so you jump right in for the student who's in front of you without any further clicks to get you where you need to go. Now, what's the big change that you'll experience on the time? Well, of course, it depends on the grade. One of the big ideas in D8 that we'll see in a moment is that measures scan across all times of year. So the time savings does change since DIBELS Next was very time of year sensitive, but in a nutshell, your kindergartners might have a small amount of added time because we're getting more coverage for kindergarten, but by the time we get into first grade, middle of the year and onward, these time savings are going to be 2 to 4 minutes each time you assess a student. 40 to 200 minutes per year per classroom. By grades 3 through 5, that's quickly jumping up to 9 minutes a student a year, 15 minutes a student a year, maybe even saving as much as 5 hours in the upper grades for a class of 20 students across an entire year. So the time savings impact seems like a minute here, a minute there per student, but it is going to be adding up a lot, and you're going to see this big difference. Again, coming from the 3 big ideas, the change in oral reading fluency, the adaptivity and gating in measures, and third, the new mCLASS itself. So as we're about to start turning into the measures, I just want to let everybody know that we have a number of questions coming up on the screen. We are answering some of them in writing in the Q&A box, and I will come back to everything at the end. But for everybody who's not yet jumping in on the questions, please start playing the game, stump the presenter, and come up with your best questions and put them into the Q&A box. Again, if you can't find the Q&A box, you can use the chat box. But the nice thing about the Q&A box is everybody can see it and can also see answers that are being answered in writing in real time. So thanks. We're getting some really nice, very detailed questions about the measures. Let's start jumping right into that. So what I promised is the big change in the DIBELS 8th edition is the fact that we're able to get more complete information from more of your students. So that's my thesis for the next piece of this discussion. Let's talk about the subtests, how they work, where the big changes are, and how it meets this end goal of more information for all students. So the first thing is that you'll notice when we look at this chart of measures and grades, it looks radically different. The DIBELS Next chart, different measures were assessed at different times of year. Absolutely grade appropriate, no question about that. Here, any measure that's assessed during a year is assessed for that whole year. So for example, it used to be that letter naming fluency was not offered through the direct benchmark at the end of first grade, or ISF was not offered in the beginning of kindergarten. And what teachers often said, and the feedback that they gave, was that there are some students who are ready to be assessed sooner. And conversely, we have many students who really still need to be assessed later. Furthermore, teachers have really provided the feedback that they want to be able to do apples to apples comparisons of growth across a year. So now for your first graders, you'll see the letter naming fluency from the beginning of first grade, middle, and end. Even though we do know that the vast majority of students by the end of first grade should know and will know their letters, you'll be able to look at their growth over the course of the year in a very clear way and be able to pick up any of the stragglers when you see that data. Likewise, you see that things like NWFs start very early and go all the way through third grade, from BOI of kindergarten till the end of third grade. So we're picking up a lot of information on the students who are ready earlier and those who need decoding much later. But we're going to see in a minute how the forms are designed to help really capture that in a way that creates very little frustration for students being assessed while giving you more instructionally relevant information. So let's talk quickly at the top of LNF. This does not have a lot of changes, and definitely not for the big ideas here, but there are tweaks that show you some of the kind of nuance that the University of Oregon was doing. The LNF form is now printed in a dyslexia-friendly font. We know that more and more of you are using DIBELS plus the new mCLASS dyslexia screening measures as a way of screening for dyslexia. And DIBELS 8 is validated for that purpose at a measure-by-measure level. So the form is also in a dyslexia-friendly font. The elimination of the lowercase l, because as we've all known over the years, it's just a common confusion point for students. Is it a lower level lowercase l? Is it an I? W, it just takes a long time to say, and it slows down the readers, especially the struggling readers. But otherwise, it's the same LNF that you know and love. Where a lot of the big changes come in are in PSF, NWF, and WRF. So that's where I'd like to focus a little bit more of our time. And then we'll come back around to ORF and to MAIS. Again, that's the renamed days. So again, the big idea is more information for struggling readers and more information for advanced readers. So PSF, or phonemic segmentation fluency as the name has been adjusted, now takes the place of initial sound fluency as well. The way it's designed is able to capture enough information that it could do double duty for ISF and PSF. And so it goes beginning of kindergarten through grade 1, as well as all progress monitoring. And it's the same task, breaking words into phonemes for 60 seconds. The big changes are, firstly, these are going to be words that actually take into account the phonemes and the words in the frequency in a student's vocabulary, as well as moving to a much greater level of complexity as we go along. So if we take a look on the left, we see many words that are in DIBELS next phonemic segmentation. And then on the right, we see that these are more common words that it's likely that students have heard, and then they're being asked to be able to break those down into their respective phonemes. Within each measure, the words quickly go up in difficulty from the classics of phonemes of 2 phoneme words to 3, to 4, to 5 phoneme words, and even 6 phoneme words are being picked up in grade 1. So we can get a lot more instructional information about the students who know how to do this, and certainly those who are at and well above benchmark. But how do we do this without increasing frustration for struggling readers? This is going to be a theme you're going to hear from me a number of times in the next 20 minutes, but let's take a look at a PSF form on the left from DIBELS Next and a PSF form on the right for DIBELS 8th. So what you'll notice on the left is that throughout the form, more simple words and complex words are spread throughout the form. For example, you could see that count is in the very, very first line of the form. If we look at DIBELS 8th, you can see that the form begins with simpler words and begins to move slowly but surely to a greater level of complexity by the time you get to the end of the form. We'll see this a few more times, but the big idea here is that a struggling reader is going to start with these easier words. They won't get stuck on count and then have a 3-second hesitation rule. They'll get to show more of what they know. By the time that they end their minute, they will not yet be frustrated by the more complicated words. On the other hand, the students who are most proficient at PSF will find that they move through the early words very, very quickly, and then they're going to find themselves in the middle of the form showing us what they really know and providing a much richer level of diagnostic data for instruction. And again, we'll see later how mCLASS uses this. In NWF, we begin to see this exact principle going even deeper. So NWF now goes from the beginning of kindergarten all the way to the end of grade 3. Again, don't worry, your early kindergartners who are not ready for this, the measure level of additivity is going to knock them out. They may not even have NWF. And if they have NWF and they're really struggling, we'll know that in the beginning of the form. It's all designed to be not frustrating. But we are also going to be able to get struggling readers to be able to show what they know or identify decoding challenges that might still be happening in grades 2 and 3. The task remains exactly the same, but the upgrade is that firstly, we're going to move from simpler nonsense words to more complex nonsense words. And secondly is, even though these are non-words, they really pay attention to letter and sound combinations that actually exist in written English that the students are going to need to be able to read. So on that last point, DIBELS Next has words ending in edge or oj or ev that they're not going to read those. In DIBELS 8th, the kind of letter combinations are exactly the kind of things that are being taught in classes and they're going to be needing for reading complex text. Like we saw in PSF, but we're going to see this even more strongly, the items increase in difficulty across a form. In first grade, at the base, we're going to have CVCs and CVCE words, quickly moving to R-controlled vowels, up to new combinations, additional combinations, and more complex words. And we'll see shortly what that goes from K all the way to 3. So in a form, again, we see the same basic idea. A struggling reader or an at-benchmark reader in the beginning of first grade might be looking at 2 lines of CVC words. And that's where they'll get to it at the end of a minute. But other readers are going to be moving very quickly into this variety of other reading patterns, going to longer as well as a deeper reading patterns of how they're making meaning of these nonsense words. If you look from first to third, you could see that we're going all the way up to the point in third grade where we're dealing with really complex word patterns. And let's take a look at this in the forms themselves. Same idea. On the left, DIBELS Next. Second graders were reading 2-letter non-words and CVC words. In DIBELS 8th, you could see what the second grade form looks like and how we're still at the simple levels in the first few lines, more complex more quickly. And now let's look at the whole gamut. Sorry, I don't have that in front of me, but from kindergarten until the end of third, we really are going across a wide range. I will use this as an opportunity for many of you might want to be able to go deeper into this kind of changes past today's webinar and past the questions that I hope you're going to start asking more of. You may want to actually go to the University of Oregon's website. All the forms are downloadable from there. I have been in a lot of sessions with reading coaches who really wanted to understand deeply the key shifts. And one of the things we've done for them is just brought in the room the forms themselves for NWF and PSF. And in maybe a half an hour of sitting in groupings and just exploring the forms themselves, people were able to get the big ideas to a real deep degree of depth. So before I go on to WRF, I do want to make that advertisement that you may want to consider as a next step. Don't wait till more PD and more webinars. Just go get those forms from the University of Oregon and do your own self-exploration, and you'll see how powerful they are. Now let's jump into word reading fluency. This is the new measure. We've asked and answered 8 questions so far, and I really want to see that number grow by the time that we're done. So please, I'm advertising a Q&A box in the panel below, and send us a whole bunch of more questions. So word reading fluency, or as I've actually heard the authors describe it sometime, call it real word fluency, is monitored from the beginning of K to the end of 3. And I want to describe both the task and the why. So students will be reading real words out of context in 60 seconds. And the reason why word reading fluency was added, and to be perfectly honest, this is the kind of thing that many teachers and educators have been talking about for a very long time, is that when we think about what we pick up in DIBELS Next, in terms of ORF and NWF, there really is still a little bit of a missing piece. We know that there are students who are able to read a passage and figure out what a word is. They pick up what the word is from the context around it and are not reading the word itself. So by asking separately for words out of context, we're able to identify students who might be struggling because they have so many words that they actually are able to read from context. At the same time, we know that there are word callers, students who are able to read words out of context, but they're not necessarily decoding. And so if they do an NWF measure, they struggle on that. They could go really, really well on word reading fluency, and then nonsense word fluency, they're struggling. And then conversely again, there actually are many students, and the research shows this. You can see the scatter plots in the research validity and reliability tests that show the population of students who can absolutely move through nonsense words and decode very rapidly, but the moment you put in front of them a more complex common vocabulary word, they get stuck. So when you look at these 3 pieces, the authors of DIBELS 8th decided that they wanted to do is triangulate more and make sure we're identifying with clarity, firstly, which readers are struggling by making sure it's both nonsense words, real words, and words in context. And then secondly, is the same theme I've been talking about, which is instructionally relevant information. So while DIBELS Next was created very heavily in order to help us assess risk of reading, here we want to be able to get so much deeper to the underneath that what this allows us to do is look at these 3 very different data points about why a student is reading the way they are, analyze their errors, and then each of the 3 different sets of information, of measures will give us different information that will drive the analysis and the instant targeted instruction in mCLASS that I'll show you in just a little bit. Again, the forms increase in difficulty, and you can see how this works from the beginning of kindergarten to the end of kindergarten. We get the basic idea here. So this is not just the Dolch reading lists. What the authors did was they took a large set of different reading lists, began with a pool of about 50,000 words that show up frequently in texts that the students are reading, but then began to line them up with what is the point of acquisition in which students typically get to know this word, both in their vocabulary as well as in their reading, and then they align those with the specific time of year benchmarks. So the whole idea of word reading fluency is to be real words, but at a point in time that it's reasonable for us to expect a student to be able to read these words as they are. They're not quite sight words. You may notice as if you look at the list that many of these are perfectly decodable. There are sight words here, there are irregular words here. The key is that they are words that are expected to be known. Now, I do want to clarify what I just said because this is a question that came up. While we're answering and writing, I am going to take this moment to be clear here. DIBELS 8th, its intent, and it functions as an indicator of risk. There's no question about that. Its primary purpose is still to make sure that you will know which students are in need of intensive support and strategic support, again, in less time. But what we're doing here is also capturing this additional information. Not only who's at risk, but what can we tell about them? The students who are not at risk, we've always wondered what could DIBELS tell us for the time that we're taking to assess to learn more instructionally relevant information. So sorry, here actually is the full length of the K through 3rd form for the word reading fluency. You can see this quickly. And now finally, let's come back to ORF and Maze. And then I'm actually going to walk you through the new platform. So the big change in ORF, we talked about the 3 passage to 1. We talked about taking out the retell. I do want to share that the passages, the big changes in the passage is these passages were written by published authors and teachers, and every passage has been reviewed by educators and parents. The goal of them was to make them be more engaging for students, to not feel like they were written specifically for a test. In other words, more authentic passages, and they are in both fiction and nonfiction. Maze, as we know, as I've said before, is now going to carry the weight of reading comprehension. So how do we do that? It's pretty similar to the way DAYS works, just with one significant refinement. Over the years, what we've seen with DIBELS Next DAYS is that students sometimes could figure out which word it was by understanding the word or words right before and right after. It was a little bit more guessable. And one of the reasons for that was because it happened that the correct answer was one part of speech and the distractors were different parts of speech. So kids could kind of parse the sentence out. What has been done in the DIBELS, in the Maze for DIBELS 8th, is that the distractors are always the same part of speech, and they've been written a little bit more with finesse to make sure that the students are understanding certainly the sentence and ideally even the whole paragraph in which the missing words are. Progress monitoring works the same way as you know and love, but more. As we've seen, we now have this wider range of measures 3 times a year in every grade, and the forms are substantively changing as you go from grade to grade. So how do you do progress monitoring? DIBELS Next had 20 progress monitoring forms for each measure, like 20 NWFs that you use across all grades because they were similar. In DIBELS 8th, you have 20 forms in general. There's a little bit of an estimation, about 20 forms per measure per grade. So there are 20 first grade NWF forms. In the mCLASS world, the same way as you've always known, where we recommend which progress monitoring measure to administer to a child, that continues, but goes even further in that when it's appropriate, we'll even recommend off-grade progress monitoring forms. So for example, you may have a 2nd grade student for whom it's become clear from their benchmark that maybe we should progress monitor them with a 1st grade NWF form to really begin to see where they're struggling. Or a 3rd grade student might be doing poorly on their oral reading fluency measure, and when it comes time to progress monitor them, we may recommend give it a shot with a 1st grade ORF passage. Again, you'll always have the ability to overrule those suggestions and progress monitor any way that you want, but I do want to let you know that we will be recommending good, clear progress monitoring forms even off grade, and then feeding that into the kind of growth reports that you're used to. Redesigned, of course. In DIBELS 8, instead of having pathways of progress, DIBELS 8 uses something very similar called zones of growth. You can definitely check that out on the University of Oregon website if you're curious, but rest assured that it's going to be a way for you to tell whether or not the students that you're progress monitoring are making adequate progress towards their future grade level expectations. Before the demo, one really key point. I know that many of you are in states that require dyslexia screening. You may be using DIBELS Next for dyslexia screening, maybe with our additional measures, maybe you're still cobbling together a variety of different tools to screen for dyslexia risk. DIBELS 8th was validated specifically as a potential measure of significant reading risk, including the risk of dyslexia. The University of Oregon understood that DIBELS Next was written before people were really doing this a lot, and they're using DIBELS Next to screen for dyslexia, but was never expressly validated for that purpose. So as we are in a moment now where such a huge number of states require dyslexia screening, they made sure to validate the key measures with respect to dyslexia. And mCLASS also has additional measures that amplify developed and did the research for validity and research for dyslexia, for vocabulary, spelling, and RAN, or rapid automatized naming. Now, if you are not using our dyslexia screening tools, and you do need to screen for dyslexia, let's say you are using a paper pencil RAN, we can add this to you at no additional charge. Just ask for it. It doesn't appear on the platform automatically so that folks don't get confused. But all you have to do is reach out to your renewal specialist or directly to customer care, and we can add the dyslexia screening measures for you. So I hope that I've done a decent job showing you that DIBELS 8th edition offers more complete information and diagnostic data for all of your students at the same time that it is also identifying risk of reading, and with the dyslexia measures, identifying risk of dyslexia in less time than all prior versions, but it also provides more actionable reporting and instruction, and that's what I'd like to show you right now. So I'm going to move into showing you what the new mCLASS is going to look like. I'll take a quick pause to summarize what we've been doing by showing you what it will feel like to assess in the new platform, and then let's look at the new reports and the new instruction. So as I've said, you now start with your class list. So I'm looking at the perspective right now of if you were on your device as a teacher assessing, you see your class list. If they've finished their assessments, you immediately see their results. And then if Emma is the student in front of you, you have all of her measures and their scores in front of you, which to move on to. Simple instructions. Mr. Say still helps you give the practice items and instructions with fidelity. And then when you go to the measure, it's very simple, similar to what you've seen before. The count up time, the counting timer goes up. You see the word in front of the child, the word's going ahead, and you tap exactly the way you always have. Things are a little bit more prominent. If they do the whole word correct quickly, you find that button really, really fast. You move on to the next words. It will actually stop you. 5-second warning will be the usual yellow screen, and then it will actually stop you at the end, so you don't have to pay attention to the timer as much. Accept or invalidate, and when you accept it, you have the results, and when you click on the running girl, you will see the results for all measures since the beginning of the year. We've listened to feedback. So many teachers use this as a teachable moment with their students. Kids always want to know, how did I do? How did I do? And this gives teachers a chance to have a real student-driven learning discussion about how they've been doing and what kind of growth they've been doing along since the beginning of the year. When we go to the new mCLASS home, the first thing you'll see is your benchmark reports begin again with something teachers have asked for a long time. A quick overview of the class summary. organized by the foundational skills. Only underneath it do we put the measure, because this really is about instruction and skills, not about the test. But we could see how the students did. In our design that I'm showing you, it's looking pretty evenly split, but of course we know that your classroom probably has something that at every benchmark jumps out that you really need to address. Underneath it, your full class, organized again by the reading skills, so you quickly can sort by those and see where you need work, by your class, composites, the scores on each measure, color-coded and raw score, and of course, the ability to drill down right away, so you don't have to spend a lot of time finding things if you do want to go down to the measure itself. For each student, there is, of course, their full assessment summary going back, and the transcripts are quickly available when you need them. What I would like to point out, which is a question that I am sure all of you are dying to ask, is what happens to your DIBELS Next data? So your DIBELS Next data will move forward to your DIBELS 8 platform, and it will be available to you in your assessment summary for each child. It will also be available to you in the reporting and analytics suite, with only one difference. You will not be able to see DIBELS Next data and DIBELS 8 data on the same screen, on the same report, side by side. The reason for that, of course, is that we never want to do an apples to oranges comparison by accident. They are not the same assessment, and the numbers don't always mean the same. So we give you the ability to access your historical data, but do it in a way that will not be confusing. When we moved mCLASS from DIBELS 6 to DIBELS Next, we did it the same way, and this was exactly how people found their way through it, and they were very, very comfortable and appreciated that they had the access, but not in a way they can make mistakes. You may have these Home Connect letters, you may not yet, but they are part and parcel of the base package with the upgrade of DIBELS 8th edition. Is for every student on the benchmark, you will have letters that you can send home or use during parent-teacher conferences that explain in parent-friendly language how their students did. English and Spanish. There is also a Home Connect parent portal, in which a parent can just, it's not customized for their child. They could just go on and find a whole set of exercises they could do if they need to, say, help their student, their child with phonemic awareness. They can find more activities that they could do at home. And now the really exciting stuff. I'm sorry, we also have the progress monitoring that I showed you, but I really want to show the excitement is the instruction tab. So for each student, we've seen their benchmark report, but we've also seen this deeper diagnostic data. mCLASS will analyze that data and come up with exactly their reading patterns. Some of you may be familiar with the Now What tools that you've had as an add-on. It's like the Now What tools instruction page, but because we have better data, we will also have a massively expanded world of reading patterns. So for example, NWF alone added 40 possible reading patterns to the analysis here. For each student, we'll have teacher-led activities, and they'll be in a small group. The small group, which is, again, it's now part of your platform, automatically for everybody with DIBELS 8th, the new mCLASS with DIBELS 8th edition, you get this tool where it analyzes the students, their specific reading patterns, looks at it against the focal areas of the grade level expectations, and it proposes a group for the students and suggests in plain English what should be the focal point to teach these students. So for those of you who used to have our small group advisor, these groups are actually not being created just on the basis of red, yellow, green, blue on specific measures. They're actually being created based upon what are the common reading patterns and what should be the focus point for this group of students. For the group, there's a set of activities that a teacher can do, 10 to 20-minute activities, very structured, very explicit instruction-based that you can work on immediately with that group. So of course, in much of your small group instruction, you're going back to your core curriculum, But here we're making sure that you have instant targeted instruction to supplement your core curriculum, but also because we know how critical time is. After you do your benchmarks, you're not going to want to waste a day to be able to have lessons. These lessons will also be available to you in like a library of lessons if you want to select your own. You can create your own custom groups. You can move students between groups. But most importantly, or not most importantly, but very importantly and very excitingly, is that students will be analyzed reading patterns and group recommendations based on progress monitoring data as well. So you benchmark your students, you'll be able to see their groups, you begin instruction, and then as you begin to progress monitor your students with strategic and intensive support, and they begin to shift their knowledge, their new analysis of reading patterns will be there every time you progress monitor, and the focus of what to teach each group is going to come up as well. We do offer, as I've mentioned, Amplify Reading and mCLASS Intervention. Amplify Reading, if you'd like it, it's an option. It's not part of the base package, is student-led adaptive instruction. The student sits on their own device, on their own computer or laptop or device, and they're put into a game-like world. It's not exactly a game. It's a full-fledged game-like world with an adventure that they're going to pursue through the year, and they move at their own pace. The mCLASS benchmark data will place them in their starting point. They will move through at their own pace, and you will always be able to see a dashboard of all of your students so that you'll know where they are in the Amplify Reading game-like world if you want that. For the youngest children, all their games connect to their own little pet Curioso that they can add powers to as they move through these little games. In second and third grade, though, they're actually in a year-long mystery adventure where an unusual woman comes to Bookerton and they have to figure out who she is by assessing the clues by working through their reading skills in the Amplify Reading world. Of course, in the end, they learn that she's a librarian. If you want to learn more, we could tell you about that mystery, as well as the 4th and 5th graders, and finally the 6th through 8th graders in Amplify Reading work in this dystopian universe called The Last Readers. mCLASS Intervention, if you want to talk more about that, you may know it as BURST. That is our connected 30-minute-a-day intervention for the students who are most in need of direct intervention for 30 minutes outside of the core instruction block. But in your main package, you get everything that I've shown you. Only Amplify Reading and mCLASS Intervention are separate. So what you get is all the new measures in the new platform, all the new benchmark reports, historical data, including your DIBELS Next data, the Home Connect letter, which may be new to you, or it may be something you've had before, the instruction tab, formerly known as Now What Tools, but now going much, much deeper. You'll still get the reporting and analytics suite. And again, it's all in less time, faster, smoother, easier for teachers. Full range of PD options, more webinars like this one that are free and complimentary that will be super useful, including how to assess in the new DIBELS 8th. But we do recommend that you seriously consider our classic PD options offered either in person or remotely, or as an online self-paced course. Fantastic PD on everything teachers will need to know to be actually able to assess this with fidelity in no time and leverage these big benefits. So I can see that we've gone through a whole range of different questions here, but please, let's open up the mic. We have a little bit more time, and let's throw us more questions your way in the Q&A, and I'll take these ones. I'll be able to start talking to the questions that have a longer answer. So I do want to comment for a moment. People had asked about the benchmarking materials, and Karen Moss from our team had responded that there are new kits. We are selling the new kits for the new assessment. You can download the materials from the University of Oregon Many people do purchase those kits because with 20 progress monitoring forms for every measure, that's a lot of paper. So we've made it easy for you, but you can download them for free if you'd like. Some of the new questions, the online training and the timing. So thank you for that one. The new platform is going to release completely July 1st. We do have a PD that's beginning as soon as June 1st. But of course, you know, it's really rich. And if you can wait till July 1st, you'll find that you really love that PD. But those of you who want an early start on PD, June 1st, I believe that the online version of the course is also going to be available in June. Let me make sure. So yes, the online version of the course is going to be available in June as well. How do you find information about how much the different PD options cost? So please, there are our email addresses down on the bottom. You can email us at mclass@amplify.com. You can also email your renewals specialist with questions. You may have gotten a PQ, a price quote, with one option on it, but you can have a conversation on more. But again, it's in person, online, or remote. Again, the upgrade PD is usually, even if you do it the in-person, one day is going to be absolutely great for you because we're going to leverage teachers' knowledge. The material kits. So for the lessons, every one of the lessons, if you need any materials, you download that lesson and you print it out and cut it up yourself. There's no separate printed materials kit for the teacher-led activities that are in the teacher-led instruction that comes with the base package itself. So again, we've spoken about the PD options. Reach out to your renewal specialist on that one. What else do we have coming in here? Let's see, what have we covered? We've covered kits, we've covered PD. We have all of the measures. Again, I hope I've been clear about what's in the base package. Last time I ran this, there's a lot of questions. Again, I want to reassure that the new analysis of reading patterns, the grouping tools, and the teacher-led instruction are all included in your base package with the upgrade. So once again, the fiction, non-fiction, we have a question. Yes, there are both fiction and non-fiction passages. Can you watch this again? I am going to take a compliment on that you enjoyed it. That probably is also feedback that I talk fast. You will get the recording on this. It is being recorded and it will be shared with you. Okay, I'm getting a few questions here. So yes, you could watch it again and please share it with others. We know that so many colleagues and stakeholders in every district have a lot of these questions. So share the recording along. One of the questions is the card kits that you have in Burst, that continues. So you will be able to continue to use your Burst materials and Burst will work with DIBELS 8th edition. So of course it gets better, but everything that you have will still continue to be work, you know, even though we call it mCLASS instruction now, no need to buy anything new. What else you got for me? Do we cover everything? All right, thank you everybody for joining me. I hope you had a good time. I hope we answered your questions. And please pass along to everybody you know that their questions are going to be answered. It's a great new assessment. We believe, I hope you believe, this will be of value for so many of your teachers, so many of your students, and we're thrilled to be making this available to you. Have a fantastic day and evening.